Are we unmuted?
Yeah, so we can start now.
Awesome.
Okay.
I mean, I'll be official now.
Okay.
Hopefully the people online can hear us. How is everyone doing? My name is Liz. I made some slides. I'm going to talk about a bunch of things today. Awesome. I'm glad you guys can hear us. I will try not to pace too much.
Okay.
But I probably will pace and you might not be able to see me. I made some slides. I gave a lot of thought about what I wanted to talk about. It is not going to be about making a great first impression and showing up on time, but such is life. So for those of you that don't know me, which is pretty much everyone here, I've done some pretty cool things in my life. I got a PhD in astrobiology. I worked for NASA. I am now CEO of a company where we do really cool things combining cloud computing, synthetic biology, and genomics to fuel sustainable copper mining. We are in the middle of a fundraiser right now. I am CEO. We have a signed term sheet. We are raising probably around $6 million, and we have signed contracts with 10 of the largest chemical companies in the world. We also have around $2 million in non-dilutive grants with DOE. We've done incredible stuff there. It's really, really fun. I've been CTO of this biotech company called Sembita, which is doing a 1 billion gallon offtake with United Airlines, the largest sustainable aviation fuel offtake in the history of the planet. I also worked for NASA getting my PhD. I worked for an oil and gas company. Oh, and then I pivoted and worked for AWS or Amazon Web Services. Yeah, I had never mentioned cloud computing in there really anywhere, but I decided at some point when I was like 32 that I really wanted to learn about the cloud. And so I decided I wanted to work for Amazon or AWS. I got an interview, worked for them for a few years, went through a promotion.
Said no.
I mean, that's fine because this is the boring stuff here. And eventually led energy data platforms at AWS. So if you are keen in the energy sector, I've worked with Shell, I've worked with Exxon, I've worked with companies all around the world to take all of their diverse data and bring it to the cloud. I've worked with some really cool open source initiatives. And then before these last two jobs, I lived in Scotland. I was a VP of data architecture and data engineering working for this company called Wood Mackenzie or WoodMac. If you ever had to Google like, hey, what's going to happen to the price of copper or how much copper is out there, you've probably looked at some data from WoodMac reports. And I led a team of about 50 people that built all of our infrastructure there. And I learned how to play politics. So that's a little bit about me. Those are all things that I've done in my career. Who I am, I grew up in a little town in Alaska. The kind of place with no paved roads, where I was the first from my graduating class to get a PhD. I have lots of stories about that wonderful adventure at Wisconsin-Madison. It was an adventure. I will happily go into some of those. But growing up, my dad was a geologist, and so we always spent all of our time. My undergrad's in geology. We all spent all of our time outdoors, camping, doing really, really, really fun stuff. And I swore I'd never go into geology because he was a geologist and I was going to go to law school and work in a fancy building and like change the world and do all this really great stuff. And I had this very foundational moment where I was playing on a bike. I was like 7 or 8 riding it and a part of my bike broke. And I was like, Dad, we have to go to the bike store and get a part to fix the bike. My father's like, Liz, we can't go to a bike store. There is no bike store. We are in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. You have to fix it. And I was like, oh, ginger snaps. I have to fix it. If it's not working, I actually am in charge of making this a little bit better and fixing it. And that has really stuck with me. And throughout my career, the common theme has been like, well, if I don't like something, I got to fix it myself. And that is really what's been a common piece about me. And if people ask me who I am or what I am, I'm a builder. So that's who I am. I started with what I've done because if you don't know this random person that waltzes in here 15 minutes late with purple hair and just starts talking at you, I like to lead with some of the cool careers I've had because that establishes presence. I can also get up here and give you a pitch about how we're harnessing microbes, and microbes have been around for 3.5 billion years, and in that evolutionary time, they're actually Earth's earliest miners. And because of that, we're able to harness their ability to transform redox reactions and use those to get more copper out of chalcopyrite, which chalcopyrite is going to be a key weapon in the path towards net zero. I can give a pitch, but I want to get more into some of the things that have transformed me. Some of the failures, the ugly pieces. I'm going to pause here. What do you guys want to talk about? What do you want to get out of today's time? Don't all speak at once. It's really hard. Here we go. There's few of us done up here.
What factors kind of went into, like you said, you know, you just kind of wanted to go into AWS and like learn about the cloud. So kind of how did you go about picking your career path, and what were some tools that really helped you as you were going through adapt to wherever you ended up?
It's gonna draw. That's fine. I'll interpret it to you. We can talk about career path. Absolutely. What else do you guys want to know? Come on, back row. I see 3 of you in the back row. I'm gonna grab a soda.
The mining engineering department. So,
I know the geologist is not getting me out.
yeah, so, yeah, I do that section.
It's fine. Okay,
But-
we'll do some days too.
Yeah. So I think that I was responsible for these seminar series, and the main purpose of these seminars is just to give perspective to our graduate students. Okay, think out of the box. Because right now they'll come here, take some courses, do research, and for example, getting an interview with these people, new ones or companies like that, go there for international work for them, but
We did that, by the way. I have a PhD.
most of us are international students.
Yeah.
So, perspective actually is, I'm thinking out of what I think that's the most important part, it's listening from our life. Because you're new here in this country, you don't know much about the industry, some of us have some ideas coming here, want to start something, but you know, always ended up to going working as a pretty good company, that's good, that good salary, good position, but we can do more, we can be more. That's the whole mining engineering graduate seminar series about. Thinking out of the box.
Awesome. And I did the geology equivalent of that. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I argued, actually, I still many days up until recently. Oh, you're crushing it. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Oil and gas company came, I interviewed, I did everything I was supposed to. I got my job with the company that I really wanted to. I started there, and a year and a half in, I was like, wow, I'm living my dream. And I effing hate it. I was miserable. And I had no idea because I was the lucky one, like everything had gone over well. I graduated with my PhD in 2013. Oh goodness, it's been more than a decade. I was the first in my family to land a job making 6 figures. Everything was going well. I was doing okay. And I didn't understand why it was so bad. And I learned eventually that there was in a place where no one looked and talked and acted like me. And I wanted to be a manager, and there were no managers that looked, talked, and acted like me. And it was slowly eating away at my confidence and my self-confidence. And I could not see a future for myself there. And I eventually had to leave. And so that was very different. When I started at grad school, oh yes, biomining. I would love to talk about the future of biomining. I'll send my LinkedIn and give my email. Mining, the industry as a whole is kind of oligarchy too. So getting in on an industry that is very risk averse is more commercial. Well, happy to take this offline too. We can always set up an office hour session. Let me tell a quick story to your point, which goes into the career point. When I started my first time at Wisconsin Madison, I graduated from University of Alaska Anchorage, which no one's ever heard of because it's not Fairbanks. And I got into Wisconsin-Madison on a full scholarship to get my master's. And no one in my family got to grad school. My mom didn't finish college. So I remember showing up at orientation. I don't know if you guys had a similar orientation, but we had to go around the room and kind of introduce ourselves. And people there were from Ivy League schools. Their parents were professors, their parents were lawyers. And this was back in 2008. And I had this MacBook that was silver and it was held together with duct tape. And it was like all I could afford. I was getting paid a stipend of $1,100 a month. And I was so excited because it was the most money I'd ever had. And I just kind of remember going around the room and being like, one of these things is not like the other. I don't really belong. I did not have purple hair at the time, but I felt completely out of my element. Like I say that now in kind of a joking way where of course no one looks and talks and acts like me and that's cool. But at the time I was very much like, oh, your parents are professionals. You did semesters abroad. You speak 4 languages. Like I don't even own a passport, person. Okay, cool. I do not belong here whatsoever. And I remember kind of having a talk with myself in my office that I was sharing with a bunch of people and being like, all right, I made it to my dream. I made it into a master's program. I probably won't finish a PhD. I don't even know if I'll make it through because we got a lecture about like, you need to publish, you need to pass your quals, you need to pass your prelims. This is the number 8 geochemistry program in the world. We need to keep our rankings up. And I was like, well, ginger snaps, like I'll go back home to Alaska if I fail and it'll be fine. But it was terrifying. I was one of those times where I just didn't think I was going to make it. And so I did a quick self-inventory and was like, what do I have working for me? Well, I haven't published papers like anyone else here. I don't know this subject. I don't know what I want to study. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. What can I do? I'm thinking back to my upbringing and what is my superpower? Quick side, everyone in here, you should know what your superpower is. Everyone has one. If you do not know what your superpower is, ask your best friend, ask your parents. My parents would probably tell you something totally off base, but like ask the people around you. My superpower, yeah, exactly. Like you can ask a question under pressure when we're silent waiting. Mine is that I can work hard. Like if push comes to shove, I will outwork any single other person. In my day job now, we're in the middle of a fundraising process and I will routinely be the first person in the office and the last person to leave. I will outwork any person I've ever met. And so that was true when I was, 21, it's true now, 20 years later. And I was like, okay, what can I do to work hard? And in my head, I'd love to say like, there was a montage where I just read scientific papers and I became the best student in my program. But scientific papers are hard to remember. Like I didn't know how to read them. I thought you just took a paper and you like read it and remembered everything in the paper. And that's not how my brain works. So I broke it into little steps and I told myself I would read 1 paper a day, every day. And then at the end of the year, I would have read 365 papers. And it turns out I would have read 365 abstracts and figures.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. Like I learned that in the process, but it was really, really tough. And there were many times where I was like, cool, I'm not meant to be here. I am not as smart as everyone else. I've been very lucky to get here, but I'm not that smart. And then in my brain, but I can work really hard. And so to me, that was the first time where I really had to regroup. And then I found camaraderie. I was TAing an intro level geology class. This story has a point, I promise. I was TAing an entry level geology class, because geology, and the other TA I was working with was to this day one of the best scientists I've ever worked with. Now she has tenure at that institution and was her Wisconsin-Madison was her advisor's hand-picked successor after intern or doing a postdoc at Los Alamos Labs, getting another professorship. Like she's brilliant, the best of the best. And that was evident from grad school. And I was talking with her one night when we were working on figures in her office. And she was like, I just feel like I don't belong here. Like, I'm not good enough to be here. And I was like, girl, shut the front door. What the heck are you talking about? You're incredible. And she's like, no, you're incredible. I'm not incredible. I don't deserve to be here. And I was like, wait, I'm rubber, you are glue, like this is not true. And we really bonded over the fact that both of us felt like complete imposters being there. Like neither of us felt like we belonged. Both of us felt like we were going to fail out. And both of us spent the next 20 years working our asses off because we had a chip on his shoulder that we were not good enough or smart enough to be there. And I would love to tell you, like, we found these tips to magically get over it and succeed, but really that's been a lot of the fuel for the fire. And I can give you a list of tangible ways to overcome imposter syndrome or the times you feel like an imposter. But it's true, recognizing it, knowing that it exists is kind of the first piece in disarming it. But also if you're going to navigate a career where you are coming from an international background, which I can't speak to because I came from Alaska, which in many ways feels completely different. But if you are pivoting careers and being one of the only non-computer scientists starting at AWS, it's so easy in hindsight to be like, well, like it's hard, you just go and do it. But know that every time you do something that deviates from what is typically established as the dominant paradigm in life, unless you're just, I don't know, an emotionless robot, if you are someone that constantly is worried that you are not good enough or smart enough, which I don't know, all the cool people I've met that are good enough and smart enough are constantly worried that they're not good enough and smart enough. So thereby, by proxy, if you're here and you're like, that's not me, I'm smart enough, this talk doesn't apply to me, like, spoiler alert, maybe check your social skills. But if you are thinking, how do I navigate these pieces? My top advice is something that I've actually gotten, and that's the technical pieces you can probably always learn. At AWS, I had a very short on-ramp to learn everything. And during my interview process, I had to fake it till I made it. I crammed, I studied, I show up to my interviews pretending that I knew everything an architect did. I fooled them, I got in, and then I had to learn it in a few months. It was fun. You can cram, you can learn. If you've gotten this far, you can teach yourself how to learn anything. Like, if you can learn thermodynamics, everything else is easy. Have you guys taken a graduate level thermodynamics class? At least in my world, that was the hardest thing I ever did. So whatever that thing is for you, keep that in your mind. If you can do X, Y, or Z, everything else is easy. I still remember, so I had like this crystal chemistry class that was absolutely brutal. And interfacial biogeochemistry, I thought I'd never use. I use that stuff almost every day. So the technical pieces, those will be relatively easy, but doing it in a way that feels authentic and germane to yourself so that you can exist as a fully fledged human, that's the trick that no one tells you. And I don't know if that's just because the people that came before us had an easier time, or they buried down their feelings, or they're not on this like second wave of do whatever you want, follow your dreams. But that to me and to all the people I've mentored in my career, hundreds at this point, has been the big challenge. Okay, so that's kind of something I wanted to get out there as a general disclaimer. Now, tactical tips and advice, make a mental note, write these down. In terms of finding opportunities, finding jobs, get a LinkedIn profile, get a really good headshot. If you're not sure if your headshot is professional, it is not. Stand in front of a white wall, have someone with an iPhone or a really good phone, take it. You can take a really good headshot. If it is something that you've cropped out of another picture, it is not a good headshot, do not use it. Crush that LinkedIn game, comment on articles, like all articles. That is a really good way to get noticed. You can definitely go the big company route. I did that. It's really easy. It's a lot easier if you have the alumni networks. I really enjoyed working at a big company to get a grounding. If you want to start out somewhere a little bit different, like at a biotech startup, for instance, if you're interested in what we're doing, let me know. I'll send my email address here. Some of the best advice I will give you is follow up. For instance, if you email me and you never hear back, it's not because you're a horrible person and I hate you. It's because I've probably gotten 500 emails in one day. Follow up and follow up again. Be persistent. For instance, there's an intern that's going to be coming in this summer. She reached out on our website. We have like a learn more about us form. She reached out on that form and was like, I want to learn more. And then she found Moji, the CEO of Semvita, messaged him directly, and then from him, got my email address and got a warm intro to me and managed to send her resume to me. So she reached out like 3 different ways to get in touch with me for an internship. That is the kind of persistence that I love. And that is the kind of persistence that like, it can come too far if it's for a recruiter, but at this level, like that shows initiative. And I would have never done that. I would have probably sent one email and been like, oh, they saw me, they didn't like me, it's fine. Be persistent. Also, don't be afraid to take chances if you have an end goal in mind. There is a science fiction writer I really like, this guy named John Scalzi, and he wrote this trilogy called the Collapsing Empire trilogy. They use a gender neutral word for empire called emperor. It's really fun, but there's a big line about this. It's a lot of political intrigue, and it's all about like the end goal is the goal. If your plans don't get you there, you have to change your plans. You don't change the goal. So my goal in life has always been to have like to change the world at least a little, to have some kind of an impact on the energy transition. I thought that was going to be oil and gas. I quickly learned oil and gas was not the space for me. One of the chapters in my dissertation was on circuit neutral pH microbial pyrite oxidation. Like I love pyrite. I love chalcopyrite. Like that has always been one of the coolest, back to the point on interfacial biology or chemistry, like the coolest microbial mechanisms for me. And now to come back full circle and combine what I've learned with cloud computing and what I did in grad school with all of these advances, the coolest job ever. This job didn't even exist 6 months ago. It could never have existed 3 years ago. Like it's been invented. The stuff I did at AWS, that job didn't exist when I was in grad school. So having an end goal, but being flexible about how you execute it is incredible. It also means when you look at jobs at LinkedIn, that there's flexibility to how you do that. If you look at a job and the actual how it's done does not appeal to you. For instance, if they're doing everything in R and you want to do stuff in Python, or they're using one tech stack and you want to use a different one, there's a lot more flexibility to that than you might imagine. With my example, I was working in an oil and gas company, and I joined a biotech startup because they came and pitched to me at the oil and gas company about using genomics in the subsurface. I was sitting like right there and I was raising my hand, like, what primers do you use? How are you doing this? And I followed up with them in an email. And then like 3 weeks later, I quit my job and moved to San Diego as a senior scientist. I really wanted to learn data science and Python because this was, I don't know, 2016. Everyone was doing data science. It was named the sexiest career of the decade. And this was before ChatGPT and before Python had taken over Stack Overflow, and it was super cool. So I really wanted to learn. So when I started there, I asked my manager to put in a development objective or 2 around Python, and I learned how to spin up a Jupyter notebook. I learned how to use GitHub, and then I got distracted by everything else I was doing, and that was as far as it went. But then I got promoted, I was doing other stuff, and I was getting kind of bored. And so in my off time, I wanted to do projects that kind of spoke to me because I was thinking about where I wanted to be next. And I always thought tech jobs were really cool. I always wanted to move to the Bay Area. I was living in San Diego. And looking at the job descriptions, I needed this experience. And so I taught myself that a little bit. I spent a few weekends. I had a Fitbit at the time. And so I learned how to get the data off my Fitbit via the API. I had to work with the OAuth 2 authentication. It's a pain in the butt. I got it. And then I was so excited. I had the data. I was able to pull in cool figures from scientific papers and use that to plot my data just because it was cool for no other reason. And then I put some figures on LinkedIn and I was like, look, I have my own personal GitHub. I felt so cool. Fast forward 6 months later, I was having drinks with someone that had just gotten a job at AWS, and she was an engagement manager, which runs a lot of like consulting projects. And she's like, it's a great company. You should join us. It's really awesome. And I was like, okay, how hard can it be? So I went to look at job descriptions and was like, wow, I'm not qualified for anything here. This is really hard. And then I saw one that said solution architect. Didn't really know what a solution architect did. But I went through and it was like, oh, you need to know how to build data pipelines. And I was like, oh yeah, I did that with my Fitbit. I know how to use GitHub. I have energy data. if I can get my way into like a first interview, I can learn enough along the way to get there. And so for my first interview, I prepped probably 50 or 60 hours and had note cards and kept working on the skills. I built a whole bunch of stuff on the AWS tech stack, so I was ready. And part of it was like a first date where I was interviewing them as much as they were interviewing me to see if I even liked it. I managed to get through to an actual in-person interview. I went there, I had 5 or 6 back-to-back interviews. They gave me an offer, they moved me to Houston, and this whole thing was a total whirlwind. And then I got there and was like, wow, I'm the dumbest person in the room. It was grad school all over again. But the point of that was that if I would have, you know, at the beginning of my career said, I'm going to be an architect, I would have probably talked myself out of it because I didn't know what it was. But I said, hey, this data science thing seems really adjacent to what I'm doing. I would love to be able to see if my sleep quality is affecting how good I am in spin class and training for triathlons. Let's pull this. And it was these little meanders along the way that got me closer. And by looking at things from different perspectives, I ended up a place I never would have expected. And by also looking at the disclaimer I said at the beginning about like, oh, the interpersonal stuff is hard, I didn't totally panic and freak out and hyperventilate and cry in the bathroom when I got to my first day at AWS and realized I was like the only person there that was barely limping along in Python when everyone else is like, wait, you're not doing like 17 different languages? It was a whirlwind. Okay, let me pause there. Those were a few quick vignettes. I share those because stories are easier to remember than just rote facts. Yes, question in the back, my friend.
You have experienced so many different things that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing this with us. Was there any qualification or attribute or skill that helped you either as an employee or CEO make you closer to your goals? Either personal goals or I don't know, professional goals.
The number one thing that has helped me is developing people skills. Like, I was kind of an asshole to work with the first 2 years of my career, and looking back in grad school, I've never quite fit in. I developed people skills a lot later in life. Like, these types of talks are always fine, but actually like truly understanding how people function, I never really got. And so it was really hard to be a frontline manager and to work with people because I would be like, why is this so hard? Just do it the way I'll do it. Like, why is it taking so long? Just do it. And even the first time I ever taught a class, I was like, you guys, like, this is plate tectonics. Water lowers the boiling point. Crustal differentiation. It's not that hard. Which, like, you know, horrible TA. But learning how people work, how they tick, because the main thing is if you want to be more than just an individual contributor, and even then you need to be a force multiplier. And if my goal is to scale up Endolith, I can't do that as one person. And no one ever sat me down in grad school and said, hey, you gotta learn to play well with others. And these group projects that you hate and are the bane of your existence are actually the backbone of everything else you will do in your entire life. So learn how to influence people, learn how to negotiate, learn different types of power, and learn how to just be like a nice person and motivate other people. That has been the biggest thing. And no one ever teaches you that. You have to figure out how to teach yourself that. Good news though, if you made it this far, I bet you can teach yourself things, hopefully. Yeah, that's been really tricky. And along with like how to give critical feedback, how to tell someone they're not living up to your expectations, how to be super nice but super direct at the same time, how to ask for things, how to really abruptly deal with lots of failure. That's probably a tough one. There's so much failure. Failure is the worst. I hate failure. I have tips for dealing with failure, but it still hurts. All right, questions for my like, I'm not gonna just pick on the front row because that feels a little hard.
What are the tips for dealing with failure?
Acknowledge it, get over it. If it's your fault and you can learn from it, take it. But if it's not your fault, then kind of brush it off. Like I had someone I love critical feedback as much, like, if I give you a document to review and you tell me it's great, that doesn't mean anything. If it is blistering with red ink because you wanna make it better, that's awesome. So embrace the critical feedback, but if there's nothing you can do to make it better, then. I had someone tell me they would never invest in a company with a CEO with purple hair, because mining operators would never do business with someone with purple hair. And I was like, okay, do I, A, go back to having blonde hair like I did 2 years ago, which I can absolutely do, or like B, say, I hear you, but that's kind of stupid and that's not the kind of culture I want to lead. How do I navigate that? And that's sometimes you get feedback that's just, you can do everything right and still lose. That is a John Luke Picard quote. Star Trek. Tough crowd today. All right, third row, I'm gonna pick on you.
I guess during your multiple recommendations, what was the number one motivation to do this transition? I guess the first one was like you didn't like it, but like
Yeah.
the later ones,
So,
I guess other than you want to make an impact.
yeah, like, honestly, it's never been money. And, because like, they say like, once you make above a certain amount of money, you're fine, and. My parents still to this day make $20,000 a year, so I was always like, hey, once I make above like $50,000 a year, I'm fine. It has been to make an impact and feel like I'm doing something. To me, the worst feeling in the world is feeling like I'm retiring in place and not having an impact. I also get bored really quickly, and so if there's something cool, like, oh, I could work for a tech company and learn all about technology and have like an upward trajectory and new challenges, that's awesome. From a personal level, I love being like thrown in the deep end, outside of my comfort zone, having to live and just struggle and learn new things. The worst year I had was a year when I was living in Scotland. I was an executive, my team, we grew up from 0 to 50 people, they were crushing it. And they were reorging the company, and so there were 3 months where they were like, we don't know where we're gonna put you, so just hang tight. Take some vacation, work fewer hours, get some hobbies, just hang out. And to me, I cannot do that, which probably says a lot more about me and like my mentality and my brain power. But I want to have some type of impact on the world. I'm not having children. I have a dog who's wonderful, and everyone in Denver has dogs, so that's great. But I'm not the kind of person who does a job and leaves it at the office and then wants to go home and has hobbies. I've done that. It does not fill my cup. I want to know that I am leaving absolutely everything on the floor, because like, my parents have sacrificed so much to give me an education. I have worked so hard to be here, and I feel like if I don't live up to every single drop of my potential, I'm gonna feel like I let myself down. And so that's been a huge driver. There's probably, if this was a class of like social scientists, there'd probably be some psychologists there who were like, this is really unhealthy, but it's a common trait that I've seen in pretty much every high performing group I've seen. My friends that are tenured professors say the same thing. My friends that are executives doing really cool things say the same thing. I make no personal vouchment for how happy we'll be at the end of the day, but I feel deeply, deeply, deeply fulfilled. And to me, that's the same thing. My brother's a high school special education teacher who has 2 kids, and he's like the happiest person I've met. And today he broke up 2 fights in his classroom and had to teach multiplication to some seniors. So I really think my life is just so much better. He says the same thing about his. So, yeah.
I consider myself like fairly goal oriented, and so when I'm working on problems, it's very easy for me to get like fixated on, okay, I need to figure out how to get to the end, like how to get to the answer of it. And I will spend hours on hours just like driving to get to that single thing at the expense, I feel sometimes, of learning other things. What would be a good approach to like still be goal oriented and still be driven to trying to find answers, but be able to like kind of set a boundary and be like, okay, I've worked on this problem enough right now. I'm gonna come back to it
Yeah.
tomorrow, but and there's other stuff that I can be more productive doing.
So perfect is the enemy of good. Have you ever heard that?
Yep.
It's so true. I sent out a report to some potential investors and there were typos in it. And one of them sent back and were like, hey Liz, do you want to fix these typos? And I was like, no, I'm not going to spend an extra 6 hours fixing this typo. I'm going to go focus on other things. Learning to accept the 80% solution is absolutely brutal. I also think in this day and age though, like hyper focus and hyper fixation is a gift. I think it is so cool because I was talking to someone in the office and they were telling me how they just like skip from task to task to task and how they wish they could just like sit down and focus on one thing. And I was like, what do you mean? You've never just like sat down in front of your computer to like bang out answers to questions and gotten up like 6 hours later and forgotten to eat or breathe or drink water? I don't know if you guys have ever done that because it's like you're so engrossed in the moment. And if you were in programming, like you get in that flow state, like you just want to do it. And I think that on a personal level, like that's a cool part of being a human. You don't always get those experiences. I know other people my age who have different life choices and they don't get that. So balancing that with what needs to be done. Oh, let me give you guys like my best life hack ever. If you're ever feeling overwhelmed, that might actually help, huh? Tactical. This might actually help. Anyone here know of the Eisenhower matrix? This is like my most life-changing thing. I do this every week. Okay, so if you are ever feeling, I love this, sorry, erase marker, guys. I think you are sparing no expense on, it's cool, it's cool. So Eisenhower matrix, you make a grid like this, and you divide it into quadrants. You have, on the axes, you have urgent, not urgent, important, not important. And you write down every single thing floating around in your mind on this. Like, charge my stupid rental car goes on this. Feed my dog dinner, work out, homework, learn this thing, eat dinner, grocery shop. You put down every single thing, if it is urgent or if it is important. Urgent things that are not important are like, I don't know, eat dinner. It's urgent, I have to do it because if I don't, I'm gonna get a headache, but it's really not that important in the scheme of things. Things that are important but not urgent are like, learn about this really cool technology I want to learn because it's just been on the back of my mind. Things that are not important and not urgent are like go to Costco and get this thing that I probably don't need. And things that are both urgent and important are like do my school assignment. You put every single thing on this matrix and the idea is urgent and important, you do this right now. This is where you hyper focus or you set a timer and when that timer is done, it's done. If it is not important and not urgent, you do not do it. You defer, you revisit it in a week. You will be amazed at when you actually do this, how many things you think would fall up here are not actually needing to be done there. And then when you become a grown-up in a work environment, you can delegate the ones in these quadrants. You can defer and delegate. Ideally, don't these, and you can defer and delegate these and have someone else do them, or you can just do them a week from now. But if you ever suffer from feeling super overwhelmed because there's just so much stuff going on and you don't know where to start, this is magic. Seriously, it's completely changed my life. Okay, questions. I will just keep giving random life advice, for better or worse. I can also address opportunities in biomining and my opinion about the future of biomining. So my take on biomining, and I have a bunch of pitches that are out there that I can send. Here's my candid take on biomining. Biomining is not new. It's been around 20, 30 years. You can see that in the primary literature, but no one's really made it work. And I'm talking about the use of microbes to accelerate weathering of key minerals. Specifically, chalcopyrite is key to top of mind right now. I'm going to talk at a pretty moderate level of technical sophistication. Hopefully this person is still listening. Otherwise, forgive me. It's not that new, but no one's really made it work. Companies like Freeport have spent so much time and energy trying to make it work, but it's not been favorable. The techno-economic assessments or the TEAs have not come out positive. Part of it is I think broadly, they've kind of thought that there's one microbe that you can find and you can kind of sprinkle on heap leaches and that will magically liberate what you want it to, and that's not true. And so what we're doing at Endolith is we are treating these complex systems the way they should be treated, like complex systems. having the power of the cloud, the understanding the microbiome, both in terms of proteomics, genomics, transcriptomics, allow us to really leverage the signal to noise that's there. So we can treat biomining like you would the gut microbiome. We can treat it like using a low dose probiotic over time so that it's not one microbe. You can use communities and you can do really cool things that just weren't possible before. So that is really, really cool. I'm happy to go into more detail. In terms of disrupting the mining industry, so was chatting with JP Morgan Chase about this yesterday, and I chatted with a bunch of my former colleagues at WoodMac. Like, we're gonna run out of copper here very soon. We're having a really hard time getting new copper projects permitted. And the new high-grade copper projects that we are getting permitted for pyrometallurgy are none of them are domestic. None of them are really in Chile or in Australia, which is where a lot of the copper reserves that the companies we're talking to look at. And so we're kind of going status quo. Humans are great at this. We love going status quo until we're like, oh man, climate change has caught up with us. We're like, oh man, there's a cheetah that might eat me over there. Like evolutionary, we're designed for this. So it's gonna get bad very, very quickly, just because we need to essentially triple copper output in the next 50 years. Overall, copper is going from a $200 billion industry to a $400 billion industry by 2050. At least that's according to some of the most recent market reports. And you cannot do that with the existing resources that we have. 70% of the copper deposits are in low-grade ores. If you look at traditional hydrometallurgy, they have on average probably 0.25% chalcopyrite, and traditional approaches get half of that out. That is nowhere near enough to meet the demands of copper we need. So we're going to run out of copper. And if you're working for a publicly traded company like I have, you have your investors saying, hey, you need to maintain production. And the people like it at this banking company that I was talking to have been chatting with very large companies who are like, yeah, we're gonna do it. We have all kinds of cool ways to increase production. And they're like, how? And they're like, things like biomining. And they're like, cool, how? And they're like, biomining. So my analogy that I came up with on the drive over here when my stupid rental car, which is very beautiful, but is electric and was not charging, I'm sorry about that, is the Red Queen hypothesis. Does anyone know this from evolutionary biology? The Red Queen hypothesis is from Alice Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. From Alice in Wonderland. And essentially it's from the Mad Hatter's Tea Party scene where Alice says something like, I'm trying to catch up, and I'm running as fast as I can just to stay where I am. And in evolution, species, it's an evolutionary arms race. Species have to keep evolving just to not die. And copper miners are producing as much as they can just to stay where they are. To keep their current production levels, all of the technology that they are using now are going to keep their current production targets. So to meet copper demand, we actually do not have a way to get there. It's a complete noggin scratcher, and that's going to be what is going to happen. Ooh, Endolith versus Jetty. Oh, we love Jetty. Jetty's awesome. They have a really great electrochemical approach that can disrupt the passivation layer on the surface. Chalcopyrite heap leaches, very complex dynamics in general. In my candid opinion, I will say this on the record, off the record, this industry is huge. We are really trying to work with Jetty because it really is a 1 + 1 = 4 type approach. Microbes play a key role everywhere, and helping them, really helping anyone to better understand the microbe. The microbial environments, we can help to get more copper out of it. So we are actively working with some joint customers to see if we can work with them and work better together. Our approach is different. It's plug and play. We're deploying biohatcheries on site and feeding in low dose biolixiviants. I purposely didn't want to give like a whole sales pitch. This is what we do, but we essentially put biohatcheries on site where we grow up microbial cocktails and we integrate them with the existing heap leaching infrastructure. It's relatively low dose. It's really, really low OpEx. And by doing that, we're aiming to get 10% additional copper back. And that's based on the microbes increasing the temperature, helping change the EH and lowering the pH. It's a very complex system as a whole, and with that, I think there is a lot of room also to help Jetty and other electrochemical approaches accelerate that. Yeah. Let me pin my email address in here. Happy to follow up with more details or elaborate more on this. Liz at Endolith mining.com. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn nano influencer. I have like 10 followers. Gosh. In all fairness, I did make some really cool copper Valentine's days for LinkedIn today. And like 3 people like them. I felt very cool. I think it's Liz PD. All right, other questions?
So I guess kind of going off of that, but one of the other growing fields is metal recycling. How are you aware of any like kind of forays into that field with biomining and like trying to use bio on recycled and like more processed metals or?
We actually are being sent some stuff from another continent to see if we can use our microbes. So actually, let me take a step back and tell you more about what Endolith does. I gave you a quick pitch and then settled into career stuff. We're essentially a platform company using microbes to accelerate mining. Our core aspects right now, we're doing chalcopyrite and then some copper arsenic work. And then we're also doing work with lithium, both lithium clays and lithium DLE. We have some DOE grants there with Pioneer, Lithium Americas, and Arizona Lithium. And we have some nickel laterite work that we're doing too that was backed by a very large mining customer. And so we're a platform company through and through. The lithium and the nickel work has really one set of microbes, one type of condition, whereas the copper is another one. We're bringing copper to market first because startups and what feeds us is a very different model than being a more mature company. With that though, we are looking at getting black mass and seeing if we can accelerate that. I think the larger issue, I think there's a few issues just personally with end-to-end recycling. There are some broader complications that even go back to how humans think through disposable components. And I have yet to see any end-to-end techno-economic assessments or just thermodynamic calculations that are not brutal and horribly water inefficient. And when I think through a technology that's going to change the world, it cannot require tons and tons and tons of clean, fresh water. Because humans need to drink clean, fresh water. We cannot use it to get the critical minerals. So there's some cool work going on in the space. It's not quite as transformative as in some of the other areas.
Okay, thank you.
So go start a company, do it. You guys should just all go work for big companies first and then go start startups. Do not start a startup right out of school. It is too risky. Go work, get some money in the bank, get the exposure. It's so much easier as a founder or CEO when they're like, oh, do you have credentials? And you can just be like, I was at this founder CEO dinner last night, sponsored by a local VC company. It was a bunch of software companies. And I was mansplained to more than I've ever been mansplained before. And it was, I think the guys there were suffering imposter syndrome, but the women founders there were awesome. But in general, it was. And it's like, you could fill out bingo cards of how you have to go over like your credentials, what you've done. And if you're not a computer science engineer from MIT, you really want that big company expertise because it'll help you think through sales cycles, commercializations, things like that. Seriously, if you're ever thinking of starting your own company or doing anything like that, reach out to me. But